What is up, my people? Welcome to another video. Today we're gonna talk boxing and this thing that's going around about the Mount Rushmore of boxing, right? And I'm also gonna talk about my predictions or my somewhat of an analysis for Terrence Crawford versus Canelo Alvarez. But first, let's get this out of the way because I feel like a lot of people don't understand what a Mount Rushmore is, right? And they pick their favorite fighters. Oh, these are my favorite fighters. Or if not, they pick, oh, these are the best fighters there is out there. And that's what they think a Mount Rushmore is. But from what I understand, when this was built, it was built by Roosevelt. Roosevelt is the guy in the middle here next to Abraham Lincoln. And the first guy on Mount Rushmore here, on the real Mount Rushmore, is George Washington, right? And then right after him is Thomas Jefferson, I believe, or I think it is Thomas Jefferson. And then right after him, it's is Roosevelt, who puts himself, you know, in the talks, which is kind of funny because Roosevelt was a funny guy like that. Um, and Abraham Lincoln. And to him, he believes that these are the most influential people in American history. And they really are, if you think about it. Of course, there's others that came down the line that I also believe were influential when it comes to American politics and American, morals and stuff like that. And that's what that really means. It doesn't mean like the best ones or you know the best records or anything like that. In my personal opinion, it means more the people that laid the foundation um, to what makes this country great, right? And and the reason George Washington is on there is because he was the first president, and the things that he did laid the foundation to how other presidents were going to act when they took office. Because if the first president would have said, you know what, I'm going to do another term, or I'm going to stay here as king and supreme leader of the land, then everybody else would have been like, yeah, that's how you're supposed to do shit. And then we wouldn't have presidents, we would have kings, which is stupid because we just got into a fight at the moment in history. We had just got into a fight with the Brits over being ruled by a monarch, a king. We didn't like that. Americans, we used to not like that. Now we're reverting back to the same shit. But the point is, back in those days, that's why we fought against the British. And George Washington didn't want that, and he laid the foundations of how we were supposed to act as a president, what a president was supposed to be. And even though the people would say, we want you to be king, we want you to be our king, be our monarch, right? George Washington was like, nah, that's not gonna happen. Because he knew that that was gonna lay the foundation to the rest of the people. And the same thing with the rest of these guys. Um, so that's what this kind of stuff stands for. And that's why when people say the Mount Rushmore of boxing today, that doesn't make any sense to me, because to build the Mount Rushmore, there has to be a long history, and you have to pick boxers within history that laid the foundation and influenced boxing in such a way that you can't really not talk about these guys. If you want to talk about boxing, you have to talk about these particular guys. And it's impossible, in my personal opinion, to make a Mount Rushmore of modern day boxers, because every boxer that we have in today's day and age, in today's day, 2025, you know, is here because of someone from the past. Someone from the past laid the foundation and made a greater influence than any of the guys that are here now. Now there is some modern day boxers that could in the future be in the Mount Rushmore, but at the time, I still it's still too early to call, in my personal opinion. So when people brought this thing up to me, it didn't make sense. I am a bit of a history buff, not I'm not good with dates or anything like that, but I do know things that have happened um, in the past. I'm also really bad with names, so I'm really iffy about Thomas Jefferson. I don't know if that's Thomas Jefferson or another guy, but I know that that's Roosevelt and that's Abraham Lincoln and that's George Washington. But um, getting back to boxing, you know, um, when it comes to my Mount Rushmore, okay, the first guy, the George Washington of boxing, in my personal opinion, has to be Jack Johnson, right? Because, and this is the actual Mount Rushmore for me personally. It would be Jack Johnson. Why? Because before Jack Johnson, it was a bit of a rigged game because black people were not allowed to box. And if black people weren't allowed to box, then it's not really a competition. You're really just competing. You know, the more people are allowed to compete, the harder the competition becomes. And that's why in today's day and age, in 2025, we can see that because the world is now part of boxing and boxing is more of a global sport rather than just a thing you do in America, or isolated in your own countries. Now we see the level of competition rise and we see more clashes between, more than just Americans and Mexicans or Mexicans and Puerto Rico or, now we're seeing, the Eastern Europeans kicking ass, the Japanese people, are stepping it up too. So, you start to see more people, you start to see more faces. You know what I mean? So, and back in the day, it was only here in America. It was only white people were allowed to fight white people. That's it. And black people have their own league called the Negro League, I believe. If I'm not mistaken. Maybe I just made some shit up. but but yeah, they had their own league, right? I forgot what it was called. It probably wasn't called that. I think it had a better sounding name than that, but I just don't remember. Um, and Jack Johnson, believe it or not, he wasn't the best in that league. He wasn't. But he got a shot at the title, at the actual title, and it meant more because it's competition, mixed competition with other federations. He became champion, the first African American champion, and then opened up the doors for the world to look at boxing. When before it wasn't the world, because when Jack Johnson did his thing, the world started paying attention. Before that, who cares? So, and I mean, there is other founding fathers, like way back in British boxing when it started, But in my opinion, this is when the world came into boxing, when Jack Johnson became champion. So this is my personal number one. He's like the George Washington. So he's the guy that lays the foundation. Of course, there's bad things that he did that people kind of still mimic today. Like, for example, not fighting black fighters. The first guy who did that, once he made it in, was Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson wouldn't give an opportunity to other black people. He would only strictly fight white people. And other black guys would tell him, other black boxers would tell him, hey, give me a chance. They gave you a chance, give me a chance. He was like, nah, I'm good. Okay, so, and this is something you could see today, where black boxers say, oh, that one Mexican guy, Canelo, he doesn't fight slick black boxers. And then you turn around and you think about it, it's like actually he's fought more slick black boxers than slick black boxers fight slick black boxers. All right, so and that's happening today. What Jack Johnson did in those days, it's happening today. Black people just don't fight other black people. It just and they want to make money the same way that Floyd Mayweather does, which is another guy that I want to talk about today. But anyways, my second one on Mount Rushmore of boxing is Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, I mean, one of the most influential figures in boxing history and in history. This guy transcends beyond boxing, and that should let you know how big his name is when it comes to boxing. And this is what I mean when I say it's almost impossible to pick a Mount Rushmore of today, because you have to see somebody that goes beyond boxing. It's not just about the records. Oh, this guy has more wins. This guy hasn't lost. This guy, no, it's not about that. It's about, have they changed the game so much to where everybody, you could see a before him and an after him. And Muhammad Ali is that guy. He's that first guy that made it to where people wanted to be more than just boxers, to influence, go beyond boxing, and he's definitely my second choice. Now my third choice for Mount Rushmore, a lot of people are not gonna like. It's Oscar De La Hoya. Okay, now why Oscar De La Hoya if he has losses? Why Oscar De La Hoya if um, he wears women's clothes, right? So if we focus on the bad things, you're not gonna understand how influential Oscar De La Hoya is. There was a before Oscar and an after Oscar. Before Oscar, most boxers, most of them, were just losers. After boxing, they just became losers. They just didn't make it. Most of them would just turn into drunks. Some of them committed suicide. Some of them became announcers, and you know, but very few became successfully rich after boxing. But the first guy that I remember doing that to an extent where he became a brand and he turned his name into a brand and became a promoter and had a career after boxing and used boxing as an almost a launching pad to becoming a promoter and to having an actual business was Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya was the first to do that, the Golden Boy. Anything he would touch would turn into gold. Was launched into you know great popularity. And it didn't even matter if he won or lost. Anytime he was in a fight, people were gonna watch it. So the most influential, because after him, everybody started doing it. Then you have Floyd Mayweather, who's also in my Mount Rushmore. He's the guy who took from Oscar De La Hoya the ideas that Oscar De La Hoya put forward and took it to the next level, and of course influenced people in way more ways, in my opinion, because it's almost like Oscar De La Hoya on crack. So he not only influenced people in the business sense, right? He also influenced people in trying to fight like him. You go to gyms, everybody's trying to do what Floyd Mayweather did, and that's really the main thing he influenced people in. There is some negative things to all of these guys, all right, and I don't want to focus on that. But the point is, Floyd Mayweather made everybody try to do a Philly show, and perform the shoulder roll and do. Oh, everybody quotes Mayweather. Oh, there's that. There's so many boxers today, modern day boxers today, quote Floyd Mayweather, and some people even use them as an example of what not to do. So there is a before and an after Floyd Mayweather, and because of that, he is one of the most influential figures in boxing history. And that's my personal historical Mount Rushmore, in my personal opinion. Of course, you might agree, you might disagree. I was debating on putting Jack Dempsey because he is one of the most influential. But the reason I didn't put him on here is because to me he's an influential martial artist more than he was just a boxer. Um, and that just that's another conversation altogether. But with that in mind, I'm still going to try to do a modern day, which is to me personally it just doesn't make any sense. But I'm going to try to do it just for the sake of keeping the conversation that people have already started online. And if I was to pick a modern day Mount Rushmore of people that are probably going to go on to make a great impact because of the impact that they're making now, you know, there's more to pick from because we we have an international stage now, meaning we have um, we have more to pick from, right? We have the Japanese, we have the Ukrainians, the Russians, the British, Americans, Mexicans. You got Cubans, you got Puerto Ricans, so it's more to pick from, right? But if I have to pick right now the most influential people right now in boxing, you know, the number one has to be Usyk. Okay, Usyk is a guy moving up to heavyweight and causing an impact in heavyweight, beating the best of the best up there, and is about to fight again against Du Bois. So if I was to pick somebody, especially in Europe, who's most influential, it's definitely Usyk in my opinion. He's more influential than some of the other guys that we know, like Bevo, like Beterbiev, like even Tyson Fury. Nobody's really trying to fight like Tyson Fury, because you can't really do that. But people are definitely studying Usyk. Southpaw stance, the way he moves, the things he's doing in there with his lead hand. You know, all of these things are very influential and are being studied, and people are gonna want to do what he did. People are already at the moment trying to do what he did and trying to even beat the guy. So that's my number one. My number two would be Canelo Alvarez. Actually, Canelo would probably be the first one, right? Like the main one, because Canelo right now he's the one that transcends boxing out of the four that I picked today. Um, there's another one in the list that also transcends boxing, but only in a small circle of the planet. Canelo Alvarez is a bigger name than most of the boxers in my list. Everybody knows who Canelo Alvarez is. Um, he's been in Forbes magazine as one of the richest sports athletes in the world. He is about to surpass Cristiano Ronaldo, which, if you don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo is one of the most popular men in the world. He's one of the most rich athletes in the world. Um, and this just shows how influential he is in the modern day. Now, depending on how his career goes, I mean, this guy owns gas stations and shit like that. So, depending on how his career goes in the future, he might be one of the most influential men in boxing history. You know, we're just gonna have to see because his career is still not over, and he's going to continue in boxing even after he retires. So, this is what I mean by having outside influence outside of boxing. It doesn't depend on your record anymore. Once you get to that level, whether you win, lose, or draw, it does not matter anymore. You have transcended boxing to a point where it doesn't matter. Like Oscar De La Hoya, it doesn't really matter if he wins, loses, or draws. People are gonna wanna watch him fight. Um, but this is definitely one of the most influential modern day boxers today. Another one is Naoya Inoue. Naoya Inoue, you're always going to be talking about him every time he fights, and some people are going to be hating on him, saying that he's fighting nobodies, but that's because you don't really know. They're nobodies to you, and that's what Americans have to understand. They have to have better perspectives and see things from different angles, because you come off as ignorant when you say that somebody's fighting nobodies. They're nobodies to you because you're ignorant, because you don't know. And from your angle, from your point of view, these guys are nobodies, right? And making Oye um, you know, telling them that he has to fight Americans and that he has to fight in America, and a lot of these things. These are very xenophobic type of rants, in my opinion, and just kind of hateful, to be honest. And it's coming from people that aren't necessarily white, because a lot of people say that, oh, white people are the most racist or whatever. That shit trickles down. That's all I'm gonna say. Because people say, oh, the money is gonna trickle down. The only thing trickling down is hate and ignorance. That's what I see. Um, so, anyways, why is he the most influential? Well, if I'm forced to make a list, a modern day list, I have to pick people that are making influence in their side of the world, and their impact is transcending beyond their spaces. And I went through the motions, because, like I said, it's hard for me to pick a modern day Mount Rushmore, because it doesn't make sense to me personally. But if I had to pick somebody from each side of the world, that's transcending beyond their side of the world and beyond even boxing, then Naoya Inoue is that guy for Asia. He is the one that's transcending. He's the only Asian boxer that we know. That's him and Nakatani. Junto Nakatani are the only ones that we're talking about. From that side of the world, right? And this is why people say that he's fighting nobody, is because his name is so big that he makes others seem like nobody. Canelo Alvarez did the same thing. There was a lot of boxers that he beat that were considered great at that time, or considered prospects at that time, that nobody even talks about anymore. And some people just forgot about them, right? And the same thing goes for Naoya Inoue. And my last guy is Tank Davis. Okay, Tank Davis, he's more popular than Terrence Crawford. He's more popular um, than most other American boxers. And anything he does, people are gonna buy. Okay, that's just the way it is. Now, the numbers compared to these other guys is very low. Okay, compared to Usyk, he's not really up to par. Compared to Canelo Alvarez, he's not even touching his toes. Compared to Naoya Inoue, he's not that big at all. Okay, now Tank, the reason he's on the list is because he has the capability of going beyond that, and also because I was forced to do this, because, like I said, I don't believe in a modern day Mount Rushmore. I don't think that makes sense. But I just had nobody else to pick as influential boxers today. I mean, some people might say Terrence Crawford, but the thing is, Terrence Crawford is not really that influential. Um, switch hitting isn't something he made up, so I can't give it to him on switch hitting. There's not a lot of people even trying to switch hit. So people aren't really like, oh, I want to switch hit because Terrence did it. No, they're not really doing that. You know, or is Terrence Crawford influential in the sense like people want to be like him or act like him or do the things he does? Not really. He's not really influential in that way. So in in every aspect, I can't put Terrence Crawford in my Mount Rushmore. It's just not there. And people are gonna say, "Oh, but he's undisputed so many times, and this, that, and the other. He beat this guy and that guy." You know, that's fine. But when it comes to Mount Rushmore status, you have to be one of the most influential persons in that sport, and I don't think Terrence Crawford is that. Now when it comes to Tank Davis, he's influential in a weird way, to where people want to know what he's wearing, people want to know what he's doing, people want to know how he trains. It's kind of weird when it comes to Tank Davis. It gets to that level of weirdness. Um, it is what it is. When people get that level of status, that's what happens. And I was debating on putting some other people on here, but I feel like Tank Davis is the most popular guy in American boxing, and that goes to show how, unfortunately, how bad we're doing in this country when it comes to boxing. This is the guy for us. There's no other guy that pulls more people, and unfortunately, compared to these other guys, it's not even close. But anyways, that's my Mount Rushmore, guys. Let me know what you guys think. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I will catch you guys later.